I built this stylish sliding barn door using nothing but standard grade 1x4s, and I'm going to show you how I did it. The design for this door is pretty simple. I decided to make the barn door with all 1x4s. The hardest part of this job probably was standing in the box store trying to find the straight boards by looking right down the board, trying to figure out which ones are straight, both directions, because we're going to be putting these all together to make a full panel to build the back side of the door. Backside meaning the side that doesn't have the decoration on it, the barn door decoration. So the whole project should take, if I did my math right, 15 boards. We separated the 3 boards that had the most defects aside, and that leaves 12 nice boards to build the panel with. We're going to use the small router to chamfer the edges. A chamfered edge is simply a small 45-degree angle routed off. That way when the 2 boards are put together and build the panel, you have a little bit of a V pattern there to separate the panels a little bit. Mr. Todd is cleaning up some of the edges with sandpaper right before we run the router down the edges to create that nice V pattern, that chamfered edge. So the small router has been adjusted with the chamfer bit, and that is adjusted down, so we're just getting a little tiny bit of an angle on the edge of these boards. That just creates a really nice beveled edge. Once those 2 boards are set next to each other, it will allow them to look a little more rustic and a little more separated. When we were finished with the router work, we laid the 1x4s in a panel on some clamps on the floor that would help pull them all together. This was to ensure fit and then to see which pieces would look nice laying next to each other. The width of the panel was measured so that I could cut the pieces that were going to end up being the barn door decoration. I got to use this very cool old saw that belonged to Mr. Todd's grandfather. Using a pencil and a square, we marked, not very well, but we marked a center line down the middle of each of these trim pieces. For some reason, I couldn't keep the pencil on the end of that square. On these pencil lines, I'm just marking tick marks to figure out where my screw holes are going to be. After clamping down the trim piece, we use a drill that has a countersink drill bit to pre-drill for our screws. This will give us a nice clean installation of those screws with very little risk of splitting this wood. Using one of those trim boards and a mallet, I simply tap the ends to make sure they're all flush and in line. But I got a little ahead of myself because we had to stand all those boards up to apply the wood glue to the edges of the boards so we could lay the panel out and get the edges all glued together. The panel boards were all then laid flat on the clamps, lined up, and then pulled together with those clamps. In order to pull those inboards nice and tight together, we use 2 long scrap boards and a series of clamps, like bread on a sandwich. This was done on both ends so that this panel would be nice and straight. After gluing the panel, we let it sit for about 30 minutes so that it would all bond together. Then we cleaned up the excess glue with moist towels. It looks really nice, all laid out. It's nice and flat, clamped up. We got some of the glue cleaned off of it. We're getting ready to put one of the boards on the end, and then we'll measure down to 84 inches from the top of that to put the second one on. The door panel was intentionally made longer than it needed to be so we could apply the trim boards and then trim off the ends so we get a nice clean cut on top and bottom. In order to get that nice clean straight edge, I used a square and pencil to make my mark straight across the door. That first decorative trim piece was clamped in place and then cinched down with the drill. One screw goes into each board except for the end boards, 2 on the left, 2 on the right. All 4 of those get 2 screws each. This is going to tighten this door down really tight and make it all one unit. Looks like I need to wear a longer t-shirt when I do this job. My overall door length is 84 inches, so I start from the end of that first trim board, go to the other end, and mark 84 inches. With a pencil and square, once again, we made our line and followed the same pattern. Clamp and drill. Now that the glue on this panel has been drying for about 45 minutes and the top and bottom board, the trim boards, are screwed in place, we can move this panel. By measuring the diagonals, we can make sure that our door is square. Then we can confirm what we found out with the diagonal measurements with the framing square. Yep, looks good. Now we're going to trim the ends off with the circular saw. That'll leave us with an 84-inch door. Mr. Todd first confirms that the saw blade is in there nice and square at a 90-degree angle so that the top and bottom of this door are cut straight. I decided to freehand it instead of using a rip fence. We'll see how that goes. The same treatment was given to the other end of the door, trimming off the excess. The pattern I've chosen will use a third straight trim piece across the middle. So we prepare that just like we did the ends. Laying the center board up against the end board, we can easily find where the screw holes need to go because we've already done those measurements twice before. We decided to go with a little bit of glue on this trim piece. Once it's glued and clamped in place, Todd and I share the responsibility of placing the screws in the pre-drilled holes to get this board tacked down. Now we got to cut those angle pieces to create that arrow shape. The pattern I've chosen is sort of an arrow pattern. There'll be two diagonal pieces coming to one end on center. I'm simply laying the trim boards in place and using a straight edge to draw a line across where the cut needs to go. That blade, sir, has seen better days.
There's a reason why it was under the bench.
Yeah, looks good.
Not bad.
So right up pretty close to that 1.5 inch mark. That was our last board, so it has to be right. We do want the screw holes to look fairly inline and pretty, so we laid that board in where it's going to go, and we're using the square, using the screws that are in this board, coming down square, making a mark on that center line. So we'll just go to every screw on center up here, and then come down here and make a tick. Is this still running?
Yeah. I guess so. Whatever it was wasn't too bad.
Right there it is, the part that makes it look like a barn door, which is this decoration, is all set in, glued in, and carefully measured screws and ready to go. The next step will be to sand it, stain or paint, and then hang the hardware. The door was delivered, sanded, and cleaned up before a pre-stain was applied. The pre-stain should allow for a more even coat of stain. All excess was wiped up with a dry cloth. Finally, we applied a layer of brown stain, the look we were going for. After the door has been stained and the header board has been stained, I found where on the wall I want that to sit, and I'm allowing for a little bit of overhang beyond the ends of the rail. The rail is 6 feet long, 72 inches. So I've located studs in the wall, and I'm going to get that header board secured so that the whole thing can be really safe. Right into the stud. The header board is up. Now I gotta get the rail that the sliding door will ride on mounted to the header board. 3 inches up to the center of the rail. I'm going to use the rail itself as a straight edge just to find my line.
That line's going through the center of all these holes.
Okay. You good?
Yes, sir.
The standoffs for the rail will be mounted with the lag bolts, and I'm going to drill pilot holes on that line that I drew.
Happy Valentine's Day.
You are the sweetest. Oh, thank you so much.
These are called standoffs. That's going to hold the rail off of the wall. And I'll get one started. And we can get the others. The end stops, these have little rubber bumpers, and those are going to go on here to help stop the door from going too far. Those are simply held on by little Allen keys, Allen screws. The door was set in place and propped up on a piece of 1x4 to give it a consistent 3/4 of an inch gap between the bottom of the door and the floor. A block of wood was stained, cut, and mounted to fit underneath that left hanger. After establishing the placement of the hangers, the holes were marked and drilled.
Live in the cul-de-sac? Yeah.
The hangers were then attached with the proper hardware. The door was hung for a test to make sure it was in the right position and rolled correctly. Then the door was removed to install the bumpers underneath the hangers to keep it from jumping off the rail. Finally, this beautiful wrought iron door handle was attached to the door to give it an authentic barn door look. My grandson Liam just had to test the door. Thank you for hanging out with me here on this episode of Daddy Curb's Farm, where we're not actually on the farm, but we get to show you a project that could apply to any homestead or farm or house. Here on the Daddy Curb's Farm, I believe that everyone has a story and every story counts. Thank you so much for being a part of my story today and letting me be a part of yours. I'll talk to you soon. I built this cool sliding barn door for a house. I built this stylish sliding barn door for using nothing but using standard grade 1x4s. I built this stylish sliding barn door using nothing but standard stylish sliding barn door. I built this cool sliding barn door using nothing but 1x4s, simple and cheap, and I'm going to show you how I did it.